again, living and following the life of Christ is not always comfortable. It's actually quite hard sometimes, and sometimes we make it intentionally uncomfortable for ourselves. But we need to do this so we can truly hear Jesus calling us to discipleship. Sometimes the disciples didn't get it the first time either. For myself, after spending 2 weeks in the most sacred place, I cannot ignore what is happening in the Holy Land, in today's Holy Land. Many of you participated in our wonderful series, Peace and Agreement in the Holy Land, Possible or Not, which enlightened us on the issues between Palestine and Israel through different histories, faith perspectives, and stories that were shared with our congregation and community by Israelis, by Palestinians, by Christians, by Jews, by Muslims, and even biblical scholars. If you followed our Holy Land blog, that Andy and I kept a log of all of the places that we visited and the people we encountered. And thank you to those who followed. We loved your comments. But the politics in the Holy Land is not simple at all. We were blessed to have been invited to be a part of this special Holy Land pilgrimage, which invited us to enter into all the sacred places of the Holy Land, as well as into biblical study and an understanding of today's conflict. In one of the stories I shared in our blog, walls were a huge theme for me. Before I left for the Holy Land, I met with Fiona and Colleen Stewart, our two young ones who are moving to New York in a couple of months. But they meet with me for regular theology and tea sessions. I told them that I was visiting the place where Jesus was born, and told them I would come back and share my stories with them. We pulled out a map of the old Bible world, and I mentioned the dividing wall between the Palestinians and the Jews. Fiona asked me, "You mean like the wall in the story of Joshua?" "Yes," I replied. "And the walls came tumbling down when they blew their horns, right?" she asked. "Yes," I nodded. And then 6-year-old Colleen piped up, "Well, why don't they just blow a horn and blow that wall down?" Oh, how I wished it was only that easy. The Holy Land, the place of Jesus' birth, is so complex. Many tour groups get shuttled from one holy site to another in between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Many tourists, jet-lagged of course, sleep on the bus rides through the checkpoints and the views of 16-feet-high barrier walls that divide the West Bank between the Palestinians and Israel and throughout their country. As you look out your window, you can't pretend that they're not there, but you can close your weary jet-lagged eyes if you choose. Our group was intentional to being alert and aware, and our guide, Reverend Peter Miano with the Society of Biblical Studies, kept us awake and away from the temptation of averting our eyes to the conflict happening in the Holy Land, and at the stops and the places we visited as well. This is not just a Palestine-Israel political issue. This is a place with religious issues, in a place where all the sites are sacred to Jews, to Christians and Muslims, as we are all part of the same Abrahamic faith traditions. Pleasantly surprised with the balance of speakers that we were introduced to and we met with, we heard from Palestinian refugees, Israelis and Jews, Palestinian Bedouins, Israeli soldiers, Zionists, people who live in kibbutzes. There were not only two sides, but we heard multiple voices, multiple stories. And it takes an effort to truly see this situation and to see in the gray areas that it's not black and it's not white. To be able to see hope to change. I think that society, including our media, invites us to rest our eyes to troubles and to invite us into mindless television watching sometimes. But we likened our learning experience to the plight of Native Americans in our own country and to so many colonized countries around the world. What am I asking? For us just to move out of complacency, to be into dialogue, to be in conversation, to move out of our comfort levels and complicity, and to do something. Jesus is calling us in our trials and awareness to understanding and compassion, to hear both sides of the story, to seek understanding of the plight of others, also the justification for why others feel the way they do. And this is what I'm challenging each of us to do during this Lenten season, to be accountable, to be intentional. For myself, as I process this trip, I would like to invite all of you to join me and my husband Andy after our April 3rd Friends and Family Lunch to share our Holy Land talk story with you. And we want you to ask the hard questions. For myself as a pastor, I hold myself accountable to share my journey with all of you. And at that time, we also want to invite FUMC Pasadena into considering their own 2012 pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And during this season of Lent, I would like to encourage you to commit to a spiritual discipline, to a Lenten discipline, which will lead you to a life with Christ. To go one step beyond prayer, one step beyond fasting, one step beyond almsgiving, and to be in prayerful action with those in your community and surrounding you. We often pray, bless their hearts, we'll pray for you. But what does that mean? How does that look if we really seek Jesus and are present and understand people's plight and pain? Perhaps you may decide to join our Lenten disciplines class every Wednesday, starting at 6 p.m., with dinner and fellowship, to explore ways that you can create your own disciplines through prayer, through worship, through being in community, and also to be alone with God. Or perhaps you may need something, a smaller step, or something more tangible. One of the most moving parts of our trip to the Holy Land was a visit to the Western Wall. The land once belonged to all of Israel, but Muslims worshiped there, Jews worshiped there, and Christians worship there. And it is a wall where people pray. It is powerful to be at a place where people are in corporate prayer together, yet in silence and praying individually. And as the pastors shared last week, Andy and I were able to put prayers for our own congregations into the walls, into the little cracks and crevices that filled that wall. And we, as a confirmation class this afternoon, are going to build a prayer wall. And we will build it on the western side of our narthex, on the table in the back. And we invite you into this small way of being in prayer. But when you do pray, we ask that you be intentional, to be accountable to what you pray for, to be consciously aware of the difficulties in life and in this world. Lent is a conversion of the heart. It can be a transformational time. Jesus was very conscious of his situation in the wilderness. He was aware of being tempted, and he was aware of God's presence. He was aware to say no to the devil. And this is also our call, to be aware and alert to life. Jesus chose and said yes to living, which can sometimes be painful and uncomfortable for some, but which gives us the opportunity to say no to death. We say yes to life as we care about our world, about the people in God's world, and are called to love one another. This is Christ's simple message for us to reflect upon during the season of